Gaurav Sawant continues to be. Gaurav, that eventually remains the big point. Like you and I have been talking about, announcement has happened, bilateral is going to take place, but India will have to keep its guard up because we fairly well remember that when India lowers the guard, believing China is our friend or ally, possibly, we have seen what happens.
Well, history has taught us it's the biggest mistake to think China is an ally. China very clearly follows one policy that there can only be one Asian giant, there can only be one superpower, and everyone has to be subservient to that superpower. So if you think China is an ally, you make a mistake. Even though India and China remain members of the same BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but it is to understand the psyche of the Chinese leadership and their actions right from 1962. The first time that India fell for the Hindi Chini bhai bhai, rhetoric, resulting in the debacle that we had in 1962. But when you talk about a buffer zone or the facts not being there in public domain, there is one thing, and I put this question to Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri yesterday. Where will patrolling take place? What is it that's been decided? So let me give you facts according to the Ministry of External Affairs. The ministry says, point one, the current round of disengagement is restricted only to Depsang and Demchok. So earlier disengagements and negotiations that have happened, those issues have not been picked up just as yet in this round of negotiations. This round is restricted to Depsang and Demchok. Now let me tell you what army sources are saying. So far in 2020, after the standoff, China was preventing Indian Army soldiers from going up to patrol point 10, 11, 11A, 12, 12A and 13. Very specific. They were at the bottleneck, the Chinese patrol, it would come up to the bottleneck and prevent Indian patrols going to our patrol points in Depsang. Again in Demchok, they would prevent Indian patrols from going up to our claim line. That's the negotiation that's taken place, that Indian patrols will go up to all our patrol points, which is 10, 11, 11A, 12, 12A and 13. They will not be restricted at bottlenecks. Similarly, India will not stop Chinese patrols when they come up to their claim line, which is about a kilometer and a half short of Burtse, en route Daulat Beg Oldie. So they will come up to Burtse. Okay. We would go up to our patrol points, as was the situation that existed before the standoff in 2020. Point one. Again in Demchok, India will go up to our claim line and Chinese will come up to their claim line to ensure, and that's a very specific question that I put to India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, what is being done to ensure that there is no repeat of what happened in a standoff-like situation, that two soldiers come face to face, the two patrols, and there could be, a face-off yet once again, and there could be a fracas, it could lead to fisticuffs, and it could lead to violence. In Galwan, that's exactly what happened. When we lost 20 soldiers, the Chinese, by their admission, lost one commanding officer and 4 soldiers, and according to Russian wire agency TASS, they lost 44 soldiers. So all of those nuts and bolts are being worked out, but one of the mechanisms that's being worked out is, and this again is source-based information, that there are 4 weeks in a month. Week one section plus and a platoon minus. Section plus is more than 10 soldiers, platoon minus is less than 25 soldiers. So between 10 and 15 soldiers will go from one side to their claim line, and week one they will come back. Week two, the other side will come up to their claim line and they will go back, so that there is no face-off. They will inform each other. Week 3 again, the first side will go. Week 4 again, the second side will go. That way there is no face-off. They will inform each other about the movement in advance. There is no accidental coming in front of each other. And the group will be restricted to just about 10 to 15 soldiers. So there is no bigger group that's getting together. These are nuts and bolts that are being worked out at a tactical level. At a strategic level, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping talk, that's a strategic higher direction which is given to the two sides, that whether this is the right time and right scope to de-escalate, which is moving back your military, higher grade military weapons, and then ultimately de-induct. Both sides haven't been able to de-escalate and de-induct from 2020 here or even in other sectors, and that shows trust level is at a historic low. So there is no question of euphoria, there is no question of celebrating, and there is no question of victory. It's a tactical tactical advantage that India has been able to secure after a perseverant diplomacy and military pressure that's been put at the line of actual control. Those are factual conditions on ground.
And this is what the establishment, I'm sure, they're aware of, because the lessons that we have learned, it has to be every step taken cautiously, specifically with China and along the line of actual control. Gaurav, in fact, for the viewer, I want to play out that bit when you asked that question. One of the most pertinent questions that was asked to the Foreign Secretary, Vikram Misri, about the announcement made, about what can we expect from what China will possibly decide to do at the LAC, and how prepared is India? What is India's strategy here? Let's listen in to that. This happened when Gaurav Sawant in Kazan asked this question to the Foreign Secretary.
सर नमस्कार, मेरा नाम गौरव सावंत है. आई वर्क फॉर इंडिया टुडे एंड आज तक. सर, चीन के रुख में ये परिवर्तन आया कैसे आपकी दृष्टि में? और जब पेट्रोलिंग दोबारा रिज्यूम होगी तो फिर बॉर्डर पे ट्रूप्स के क्लैशेस ना हो जाएं, क्या इसका भी कोई मैकेनिज्म है? और डिसएंगेजमेंट तो हो रहा है, क्या डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की भी बात हो रही है?
अभी जो अरेंजमेंट्स और अभी तक जो समझौता हुआ है, उससे पहले हमें ग्राउंड पे इम्प्लीमेंट करना है. ये एनालिसिस की ये कैसे हुआ, इसको मेरे विचार में बाद में देख सकते हैं. आपने कहा कि जो आगे फेस ऑफ्स ना हो, क्लैशेस ना हो, उनको कैसे रोका जाए. मेरे विचार में बहुत ही ये एक अहम आपने सवाल, एक अहम मुद्दा उठाया है. और हमारी आशा है और हमारा प्रयत्न रहेगा कि जो अरेंजमेंट्स वर्कआउट हुए हैं, जिन पे समझौता हुआ है, वो ऐसे अरेंजमेंट्स हो जिनसे इस तरह के क्लैशेस रुक सकें जो पीछे हुए हैं कहीं कहीं पे लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल के पास. तो इसमें आगे हमें देखना पड़ेगा और लगातार प्रयत्न करना पड़ेगा, लगातार कोशिश करनी पड़ेगी कि जो मैकेनिक्स हो जो अग्रीमेंट के, वो ऐसे रहें कि इस तरह के जो क्लैशेस हैं उनको रोका जा सके. जहां तक आपका अंतिम प्रश्न है कि डिसएंगेजमेंट हो गया है या हो रहा है और डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की बात कहाँ आती है, मैं फिर से यही कहूंगा कि अभी हमें पहले डिसएंगेजमेंट पे फोकस करना है और डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की बातें सही समय पे होंगी.
So I want to go back to Gaurav on that. Gaurav, tell me this. Now, that announcement has happened. There's a certain deliberation discussion happening over it. With regard to that, now that this bilateral is happening, what do you think this meeting is going to be on agenda with? What are the highlights? Is it trade, economic cooperation? Because that also is important for China. India has friends all over. It clearly has a non-alignment power. It definitely is becoming a mediator in many ways, while China does look isolated. So what do you think is happening? What is the reason China also wants to have this bilateral?
So, as you rightly point out, India is multi-aligned. India is aligned to various groupings and organizations, and that shows India's growing importance globally. India is a part of Quad, and Quad is something that China feels very threatened about. At the same time, India is a part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India is a part of BRICS. At the same time, India is also a very critical part of G20, and for the past several years is being invited to G7 as a special invitee for several years, whether it's happening in Italy or France or Japan. And that shows, again, India's rising importance. And India is a very, very powerful diplomatic voice, economic voice, and in the region, a very powerful military voice. That's the message that India has been able to send across. Now, we hope to be and aspire to be the third largest economy in the world by 2030, and the world is watching. The world is watching the developments that are taking place in India and how India influences the region. If I may just pick up the smaller aspects, which actually impact the world. G20 presidency, you become the voice of Global South, and African Union is made a part of it. In our neighborhood, every time there's trouble, a country like Sri Lanka, which faced immense trouble, the developed world, they kept talking big about how they will help Sri Lanka or what they want in return to help Sri Lanka. India volunteered help instantly to Sri Lanka, and the people in Sri Lanka realized that even if there is a communist government that comes to Sri Lanka, they realize India's significant role there. In Maldives, every time there's trouble in Maldives, it's India that jumps to Maldives' rescue, and in more ways than one. Similarly, when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, both Russia and Ukraine realize when it comes to Russia, India is a very close strategic partner. The personal bond between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President Vladimir Putin is there for the world to see. And if Ukraine feels uncomfortable about it, India is not embarrassed about, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Putin hugging each other. That's our civilizational way of staying in touch. And the Prime Minister, the External Affairs Minister, India, they've made it very clear, Russia or even the Soviet Union earlier had done nothing ever that would be detrimental to India's interests. They've always worked in India's interest. So that is a close bond between the two countries. Russia respects that.
Amazing.
India
Yes.
respects that. What's the other message that's going out? India is telling the world, don't give us moral lectures. We are not going to look at the world, at Russia through the Western prism. We'll look at Russia through our prism. If you can do that, good for you. If you can't, your problem. Equally close interacting with Ukraine. An effort to find a solution. Whether solution comes or not, at least that effort is being made. And that was the conversation that happened yesterday between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the new Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. When he came and called on Prime Minister Narendra Modi and met Prime Minister at his hotel, the message was, how do you find peace in West Asia? Again, India very close both to Israel and to Iran, and not taking sides in a conflict, except not on the side of terror. Pooja.
A historic civilization, presently a stable economy and one of the largest in the top 5, and then possibly a future world leader as well, who has friends and allies across the world right now. West also trying to cozy up to India, and perhaps China also realizes that it cannot ignore India anymore.